Pop quiz. On what day did the 13 colonies vote to declare independence from the Kingdom of Great Britain? Incorrect! Congress voted in favor of independence on July 2nd, though the declaration itself was not officially adopted until July 4th. Even then, only 12 colonies voted to approve it, with New York, which awaited word from its provincial Congress, abstaining until the 15th. Fear not the Jackalope, we're here to clear it all up on this episode of Bigfoot's Great American History Show. When the First Continental Congress met in September of 1774, following the passage of the Intolerable Acts, most Americans still hoped to maintain union with Great Britain. They were British, after all, and had been for a century and a half. While they would not tolerate the new acts, most still remained loyal to the king. In May of the next year, however, the British fired on colonial militia at Lexington and Concord, whereupon the Second Continental Congress convened to prepare for the defense of the colonies. Even then, many delegates to the convention hoped to maintain ties with their cousins across the Atlantic. As it was, the delegates from several colonies had not been invested by their provincial congresses with the power to vote for independence. Thus, even after the outbreak of the war, efforts continued to be made to address colonial grievances in Parliament. John Dickinson of Pennsylvania even proposed paying for the tea damaged at the Boston Tea Party. He would later write the aptly named Olive Branch Petition to King George III. Meanwhile, King George, to whom so many Americans remained loyal, did his royal best to lose their loyalty. In December of 1775, Parliament passed the Prohibitory Act, which prohibited all trade with the colonies. In other words, all American trading ships were liable to be, quote, forfeited to His Majesty as if the same were the ships and the effects of open enemies, and shall be so adjudged, deemed, and taken in all courts of admiralty, and in all other courts whatsoever. 2 petitions sent by the Continental Congress to the king were refused. Still, Congress awaited a more dramatic shift in colonial popular opinion before making the move for independence. Enter Thomas Paine, an English-born corset maker who had landed in America in 1774 with a letter of recommendation from one Benjamin Franklin. In January of 1776, Payne published Common Sense, a pamphlet that blasted the once-beloved monarchy and made a persuasive case for independence from the British. After all, he said, the French were unlikely to lend aid to the American cause unless the colonies first declared independence. Otherwise, why would the French involve themselves in the internal affairs of their longtime enemy? Payne's form of common sense spread like wildfire. Before a few months had passed, the pamphlet had sold more than 100,000 copies. On May 15, 1776, Congress passed a resolution urging the colonies to adopt governments that, in essence, were prepared to declare independence. Less than a month later, on June 7th, Richard Henry Lee of Virginia proposed what's now known as the Lee Resolution, calling for the 13 colonies to become 13 free and independent states. Resolved that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved. 4 days later, Congress appointed the Committee of 5, composed of Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, Robert Livingston, and Roger Sherman, to compose a Declaration of Independence. The committee entrusted Thomas Jefferson to write the initial draft of what became the Declaration of Independence. On July 1st, Congress voted 9-2 in favor of the Lee Resolution for Independence, with Pennsylvania and South Carolina opposing and Delaware divided. New York, which was at that time preparing for an imminent invasion by the British, still waited on authorization from its provincial Congress to approve the resolution. By the next day, July 2nd, the tide had turned irrevocably. The vote came in 12-0, with only New York abstaining. So it was that on July 3rd, While the British Army landed on Staten Island, John Adams wrote to his wife, "The 2nd day of July, 1776, will be the most memorable epoch in the history of America. I am apt to believe that it will be celebrated by succeeding generations as the great anniversary festival." Nearly so, anyway. On July 4th, Congress formally approved the text of the Declaration, which was then reprinted in newspapers across the newborn nation. American soldiers in New York heard the Declaration read to them on July 9th. A week later, New York finally received authorization to approve independence. Thus, when the Declaration was signed on August 2nd, a declaration by the representatives of the United States of America became the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. 56 men eventually signed a parchment copy of the Declaration of Independence, including 2 future presidents and, of course, the President of Congress, John Hancock, who famously signed it in a large and flowery hand. Fun fact, the Jackalope, today humans sometimes refer to his signature as a John Hancock. So there you have it. We hope this episode helps you show off the next time you gather around the grill with a few friends on Independence Day. If so, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel and hit that notification button to ensure you don't miss an episode. For now, this is Bigfoot saying so long and save me a seat at your next campfire.